Welcome to another episode of Bert's Bike. Today, we're looking at the Indian Scout. Now, I've owned a Scout 60 in the past, and I did take the 1200 on a test drive when I bought that bike. However, it was a very short test ride, so I'm curious to see how this stacks up against my old Scout 60. Hey there YouTube land, it's been a while since I've made a video. I haven't had a bike for a while because I sold all my bikes and I ordered something else, so stay tuned for that. So in the meantime, I had a chance to rent this Indian Scout from my local dealer here, Music City Indian. Shout out to them. It is a gorgeous bike for sure. So right off the bat, the thing that really grabs me with this particular bike is how good the paint job is. I mean, it looks incredible. I mean, with the chrome pipes and the chrome accents on the engine, it just looks really, really good. I actually like the look of the Scout 60 motor better, with just it being completely blacked out. But this one does look incredible with this paint job. And also, I really do like the luggage on this bike. It just seems to complement the bike and the lines very well without detracting too much from the overall styling of the bike. Of course, I prefer it without the bags on there look-wise, but hey, if you're commuting or, running errands with this thing, the bags are a really, really nice feature. So this particular one does have this sort of like fastback seat on here, which is great. It is really comfortable, actually. The regular Scout seat only comes up to right here, and I do like this one better, especially if you're riding for a long period of time. But just the drawback to having this is you can't have the luggage rack on the back. So, it's whichever one you need more. You need passenger room or you need a luggage rack. This one does have the full 6 gears on it. It's unlike the Scout 60 that only has 5. Are they that much different, or are you better off getting this over the Scout 60, or better off getting the Scout 60 over this? So let's talk about that. All right. Honestly, it sounds about the same as my 60 did. Maybe a little deeper. Alright, so after a few days and a few hundred miles on this Indian Scout, I can tell you it is a really fun, powerful package that Indian has to offer here. Compared to the Scout 60, ergonomically, it's about the same. The only big difference is the stock seat on the 60 versus this one. Now, I'm not sure which year Indian decided to use this fastback style seat, but it was a change moving forward. On my old Scout 60 seat, I was able to get about 50 or 60 miles, and then I would start experiencing some discomfort. But this one I was able to ride for a long period of time throughout most of the day, and also multiple days, without much discomfort at all. And the Scout 60 seat, the stock seat, is not bad at all. They're both comfortable when you get on them, but for the long haul, this one seems to be a lot better, at least for me. On the old seat, it would cup you in more, and this one you also sit more on it. Now, there is one little small drawback to this seat, is that chrome plating with the Indian logo on it. You tend to feel that on your lower half at some points in the ride, depending on how you're sitting on the seat. It wasn't uncomfortable, but it definitely was noticeable. The bike handles almost exactly the way I remember my Scout 60 handling. It was fast in a straight line, but you had to be a little more methodical about, turning into corners and also making turns on this thing. You just have to wrestle the bike around a little bit, coming from riding you know, cafe racers or naked bikes. It's just something to be aware of. So just like the Scout 60, these do come with forward controls. So depending on how comfortable you are with that, that would pretty much determine how comfortable you are making turns on this bike, or how easy or not easy it feels to you personally. I think cruiser riders definitely will feel right at home on this bike. Alright, so let's talk about the handlebars on this motorcycle. So just like my Scout 60, the bike came set up with the bars fairly low but swept back. I found it was more comfortable if I rotated them up, effectively leaning me forward just slightly and also bringing my hands up further. Since this was a rental, I didn't really want to mess with any of that, so I just kind of kept it the way it is. The other thing on my old Scout was the clutch pull was really heavy, and that's the same on this motorcycle as well. And after riding Harleys and other bikes, Hondas and everything, you know, this really is on the heavier side. And just for contrast, I did take out the new 2022 Indian Chief, and the clutch pull was noticeably lighter. Now, I don't think it's a deal breaker, but depending on the type of riding you're doing, for example, you're in a lot of traffic and you have to feather that clutch in, you know, going between like 1 and 5 miles an hour, stop and go, that could get very fatiguing. And in fact, for me, it was pretty fatiguing on my Scout 60. I also like to keep my clutch pulled in at a stop in case I have to go at a moment's notice. So it's not the worst thing in the world, but you know, you just want to be aware of that. So as stated earlier, the bike does have a 6-speed transmission, and this is where the bike gets pretty awesome. So around town, you know, 35, 55 miles an hour, you might not even need 5th or 6th gear. For mainly in-town riding, and, you know, speeds up to 55 miles an hour, I found myself keeping it mostly, you know, 3rd and 4th gear for the most part. And this is the point where the Scout definitely is different than the Scout 60. It's highway riding or high-speed riding. So it definitely picks up and goes and will keep going. In contrasting that with the Scout 60 was definitely no slouch, but the Scout definitely has more power all around for sure. At slower speeds, I don't think you're really going to notice it too much, but when you get out on the highway is where those extra cc's really kick in for you. And I would say for a mid-sized cruiser, this thing really is competent on the highway and gives you a lot of confidence when maneuvering through traffic. So, win for Indian there. If you're going to be doing a lot of highway on this bike, maybe a windscreen to at least take the pressure off your chest would be a good addition in my opinion. So let's talk about the gearbox on this thing. The 60 versus this one. So the 60, I think, it feels like anyway, it has longer legs, and this one has shorter spacing between the gears. But the 6th gear definitely takes off, just giving you more flexibility for that higher speed cruising. So let's talk about how the gearbox feels on this. So every rider feels a motorcycle differently than the next one. But for me and some other riders I've talked to, the gearbox seems smooth most of the time, but here and there you feel this kind of notchiness sometimes between gears, like the gear is almost passing through a gate or something. After riding a few Scouts, actually, I feel like this is just maybe a characteristic of the gearbox, and either you love it or you hate it. So knowing this, I was a little bit more at ease about my initial thoughts about my Scout 60's gearbox. So I'm chalking it up to it's probably just a characteristic of the bike at this point. So depending on who you are, it may or may not bother you, so I encourage you to definitely go to your nearest dealer and get a test drive on. Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about gas mileage, because I know a lot of people like to know this little tidbit. So with my Scout 60, I was averaging about, I would say, 44 miles to the gallon, and you can go back and check out my video. I think I touched on that a little bit. So about 44 miles to the gallon, give or take, 3 or 4 miles an hour up or down. I did manage to get it on the long trip, like in the higher numbers. And on the regular Scout, I'm happy to report it's about the same. So on a few fill-ups, I got a mid-40s, and on one time where I was doing half interstate, half in town, I managed to get 50 miles per gallon. And this is me not babying the bike at all, just, overtaking when I need to overtake and driving normally, but definitely not lugging the engine, just doing what I need to do for the situations at hand. So what are my final thoughts on this motorcycle? Well, I feel like as far as mid-size cruisers go, it definitely has a very, very unique look and attitude to the bike. And that's what I really love about Indian motorcycles, is they really do knock it out of the park with design, and they're not afraid to give you a bike with adequate power. Of course, you're gonna put a pipe on it, you're gonna put a tune on it, you're gonna do all this stuff to make the bike your own. But out of the gate, if you just kept it stock, it's perfectly fine. A lot of times when you buy a motorcycle, there's this checklist of things that you have to do to it, And I think out of the box, short of, adding some luggage capability to it, it is definitely just ready to go. So which one should you get if you're considering the Scout or the Scout 60? Well, I think it comes down to about 3 things. Are you doing a lot of highway riding? Yes, then the Scout has the edge over the 60. And up until recently, you couldn't get that blacked out engine unless you bought the Scout 60. Now Indian has released the Scout Rogue, which uses the blacked out engine now for that platform for the full 1200 cc's. So now that changes up the game a little bit. And the last and final reason would be, what is your budget? The Scout 60 is a very attractive price for a lot of buyers, especially a lot of first-time buyers who are spending, close to the $10,000 mark for their, second or maybe even first motorcycle. So you could essentially get the Scout 60 and then spend the extra money over time, or just spend that extra budget on upgrades and accessories like a luggage rack or a new pipe or a tune or something like that. So just a few things to think about. For me personally, in a way you kind of already know my answer, because I did buy the Scout 60 when I bought my first Indian. However, if I had a ton of disposable cash at the time, it might have been a little bit harder to just say, okay, I'm just going to go with the Scout 60. So again, it's just a personal preference. I don't think you can go wrong either way. Alright guys, well that about does it. Thanks so much for tuning in and listening to me ramble on. Again, it's Bert's Bike, and I'll catch you on the next one. Please don't forget to like and subscribe.